you have two courses out and they are both pretty successful, I would say. So how did you make them successful? Because you probably didn't just put them on Udemy and then hope that something would happen. You did some marketing, right? Maybe you can tell us a bit how you got people to actually buy your courses on Udemy.
Yeah. So we're back to that part where I would have a few pieces of advice that I would give myself when I initially started this. And I think that the most important one that the people that are hearing us right now should listen to is that they should just start doing it. It doesn't matter whether you are good or bad at what you do. If it's a blog, if it's maybe an article or a course or anything like that, you should just take the initiative and start. Just do it, like that really famous commercial says. I mean, that brand of sneakers says, just do it. Yeah. Exactly. Because and I have a small story here. I have a very good friend of mine that recently found out that I'm working on writing a book, and he was really happy for me, but he said at the same time that he always wanted to do that, but he never really found the time. He always said that he doesn't really, apart from his job, he doesn't find that specific time to do extra things like a book or a course or anything like that. And I just gave him my example, right? I've had this year probably the worst year of my life because I've had very serious health issues. I've had a very bad and a very severe heart disease, and I'm still recovering from that. I have multiple other problems on the health plan. So basically, in terms of my personal health, I'm not in the best spot. And I told him that I don't want you to feel bad for me. I'm not saying this because of that. I'm saying that if I can do it and if I can find time to maybe create a course or update a course or write an article, if I can find time in my situation, what's your excuse, right? I mean, why don't you do that? Because you would probably be much better than I am, because you would have a much better health, you'd have a much better initiative than I would have, because I'm not feeling that well right now. And I think that this is something that everybody should hear out, and they should stop doing or making up excuses for themselves. They should find that time and do something that they love, that they like, because that thing is going to really empower them. And that's really important. It's not always to be like, I have a job and this is where my life ends. It's obviously really important to have a personal life. It's essential. But you shouldn't come up with things that I can't find the time to do that. I'll never have the time. Yes, you do. You do have that time. You just have to find it. You just have to be organized. Just have to take the initiative and be motivated to do it. And this is what I told him. Hey, this is my situation. I'm not in the best place right now, and I'm still doing it. Why aren't you doing it? Why are you telling me that you don't have time? I'm sure that if you can try to think of it, you'll find a bit of time to do what you want, right? To write that book. So this is the first advice that I would give to myself a few years ago, because I was doing the same things. I was just procrastinating and I was saying, I don't have time for that. But I was playing on the computer, for example, right? Or maybe an hour or two with my friends. And I was saying that I don't have time. I'm busy with my job. I'm busy with school, university. But I wasn't really thinking that I should make time for it, because it's important, right? This is the first step towards creating some content. It doesn't matter the type of content, right? So this is what I would give as the first thing. Just do it. Just start. And something that's really bugging me out, and I've heard a lot of my friends saying that they want to start doing something, but they're saying that I'm not an expert at that. How can I teach that through a blog post? Or how can I create a course, right? It's the course is huge. How can I create a course? Because I don't master this really well. And I always tell them that the best way to learn something is by teaching it. And I think that we've all heard about this, but believe me, you just have to try it and it will do magic. It will do wonders for you. It's just such a great technique for you to learn something and then to give back and just teach somebody else about it. It makes you start putting the right or questioning the right things. How does this concept work? Why is this concept here? Why? Because you are trying to explain to somebody else, and you might even realize that you don't know that concept. So even though you're not maybe the best Android developer, or maybe you're not the best, I don't know, web developer, whatever, it doesn't mean that you can't start teaching something. Just set your mind to it and you will do it. I started teaching Jetpack Compose after I've just written a couple of articles about it. I didn't know Jetpack Compose. I wasn't part of the team that developed it, right? I didn't know too much about it. Yet I started learning about it and I tried teaching people as I was learning, and it was a really nice journey, right, for you, because you start understanding concepts much clearer. You start asking the correct questions, because you're not only asking yourself, you're asking them for your readers, for your viewers, right? And that just makes you think about things that maybe otherwise you wouldn't have thought. So this is my second thing. You don't have to be an expert. Don't make that as an excuse. You can teach things without being really good at it. You just need to have that kind of motivation to learn it. And then I would also have my other side of friends, right, that would say that I don't have money for expensive equipment. I don't have money for expensive software, like to do video editing. I don't know how to do it. And I always said that you can always start small. And I've seen that story about a particular girl that was just really keen on teaching people a specific skill set, right? And she didn't have a camera, right? She didn't have money to buy one. So she filmed everything with her phone. And at that time, the phones weren't that good as they are now, right? They were pretty crappy. And she still did it, and she made money of that because of that, right? And I think that this really goes to show that if you want to do something, you don't have to have the most expensive $1,000 microphone, right? Or the $2,000 camera, right? You just have to start with something, and you will be rewarded, and you will be able to buy new stuff as you go along. So don't make that your excuse either. And I think that also something that's really important is to keep grinding. When I first published my course, it just sucked really bad, because I didn't have that kind of enrollment rate that I was hoping it would have. I wasn't receiving huge amounts of money as I was expecting to be. Why? Because when somebody tries to do something, right, and tries to kind of spend some time and create a product, they expect that product to be successful out of the box, right, from the first try. And I'm here to tell you that statistically, that won't happen in most cases. If you're lucky, yeah, if you're really good, yeah, it will happen to you. But most of the time, the first tries for your product or course, whatever, they won't be as successful as you're expecting them to be. And the most important thing is here that you should keep grinding. You should keep coming up with ideas and projects and products, because at some point you will actually be successful. And one of those products will be really good. And again, you should really try to not bail or abandon the ship after one project that wasn't really successful. Just try to be consistent and say that, hey, it didn't work out that well for me for the first time. It doesn't mean that the second time it will be the same. And this brings me to something very, very important, something that I've learned, and that is, you should really be careful about the subject that you are picking, right? Again, we have covered the idea that you don't have to pick a subject that you're good at, so you don't have to be restricted from that point of view, right? You can pick everything that you set your mind to, because as you are learning, you can teach people. But the question remains, what subjects should I pick? How can I make sure that the subject is good? And I've made this mistake, and I just went with the idea that I know some Android development. I'm pretty good at it. At least that's what I thought I was. So I tried to make an Android course, which turned out to have a lot of students, but it didn't have that kind of consistency, and it didn't have that kind of huge revenue that I was expecting. Why? Because I didn't try to investigate the idea. I didn't try to evaluate the idea before I would put it into practice. So something really important, you're thinking of making a course. So you're hearing us right now and you're saying, yeah, I'm going to do a course about this, or I'm going to write a blog about this. Before you do it, try to make sure that that subject doesn't have a huge competition. You want to search those areas that have low competition. Maybe there are 2 or 3 other courses but they are not really teaching the subject really well. And you're saying to yourself, yeah, I'm going to go there and I'm going to try to do a better job than those guys, and I'm going to take their bread, right? After all, I'm going to take that kind of user share, that students share that you're looking for. So try to find those subjects that don't have that much competition, and because that's a place where you can be successful, right? And most importantly, it's not enough for them to be with low competition. I mean, something really obscure can have low competition. The question is that subject in demand, right? Do people actually want to learn about that subject? And this is a great thing when I started making my Compose project. Compose wasn't in alpha. I mean, I think it was in a very, very alpha release, and people weren't really talking about it that much. So I said, why don't I make a course about it? Because I didn't see too many other courses on Compose. They were pretty bad. They had like 30 minutes of content or something. And I said, why don't I do that? Because I think that this might be the future of development, right? Because we have Flutter and React Native that have the same declarative paradigm, right? So why can't I bet on this horse, right? And why can't I think of this subject to be successful? Because eventually Android will build UI just like the other platforms are. For example, iOS is doing the same with Swift UI, right? The same declarative paradigm. So it was clear that Android was going into that direction. So I tried to make a course on that. I didn't know too much about Jetpack Compose, and it kind of worked, at least until now. We will see afterwards. As you said, topics kind of lose their interest really fast, and everything gets deprecated. And yeah, that's something that we have to live with, right? It's something that we kind of, it's a risk that we have taken. So apart from picking a good subject and making sure that it doesn't have competition and that it's in demand, I would advise you to try to center your product, be it an article, a series of articles, or a course, to be a hands-on project, right? You want people to give them, you want to give them that experience of actually building something. Because I think that the best way to learn something is by building something. I think that this is widely known and widely accepted by developers, that it's much easier to learn something by building it. So just don't come with a course that has theory, right? And maybe some examples without any kind of context, because no matter how good a subject is, it won't really make the difference that you're looking for. So it's really important for the kind of to have your course built with this kind of idea that it's practical, that you have to go through a journey and experience building multiple or just one huge app. It will help readers to better conceptualize the concepts and see how they can apply those things in the future. I've actually had one of the students tell me that he was really glad that the course had practical examples, because as he's now writing Compose in real life projects, he's coming back to the code that we've written in this course because it helps him have that kind of reference point. It helps him to have that starting point, right? So yeah, this is another piece of advice. And what I would also like to enforce is that you want to keep your videos simple, right? Your course simple. And regarding what you said, Florian, I don't think that a course or a tutorial should go into really advanced topics. It should really cover the starting point of that kind of library or concept or programming language that you want to cover. Why? Because, well, you need to provide the student that kind of starting point, that kind of launch pad. And from that on, it's his responsibility to kind of scale things and try to understand things even better and try to explore other APIs within that library or whatever. Why? Because you can't really provide a course that covers everything. It's impossible. It's just these kind of areas are so complex. These kind of libraries are so complex that if you would try to cover everything, I don't think that you would even make a favor, or it wouldn't be that good for the student, because he wouldn't really go through that trouble of trying to build on top of what he learned, right? So you need to try to provide a starting point. You need to provide him a good launchpad so he can be independent from that point on. That's very important. Now, you said something about marketing. I think that this is something really important, right? And marketing, of course, is really difficult. or marketing a blog is really difficult. It's not like you're gonna go on, I don't know, social media and just promote your course and people are gonna instantly jump in and buy your course or join your course by default. That's not gonna happen. And this is where you actually need an online presence, an audience, exactly as you mentioned, Florian. And that's a great point. You need to make sure that you build an online presence. You need to make sure that you invest time in that and you build an audience, because that audience will likely buy your course, will likely try to listen to what you have to say. And this is one of the biggest mistakes I've done. I've started doing that so late in my journey because I didn't know that I was supposed to. So if you're starting out right now and I don't know, you're a junior Android developer or a mid Android developer, just start building an online presence. You have no idea how much this thing will help you in the future. So this is where I totally agree with you, Florian. And as you start creating your course, as you start adding content to your course, I've seen this in content creators. Some of my friends, they have this kind of tendency, and starting with me, to be perfectionist. They try to edit those videos to be perfect. They don't want them to have one blooper or something. They want to have the perfect noise reduction. They want to have everything as perfect as possible. And I think that while this is a good attitude, it's not the most productive one. Most of the time, what happens with courses on Udemy is that you need to find that niche topic where you go and plug your course into so you can be successful. The most important niche is like, a general Android tutorial, general Android course. They are already taken by the giant teachers that have hundreds of thousands of students, and you have no chance to compete with them. So when you find the niche, and this is really important, you don't want to go into those generic topics. It's important for you to make a difference. So sometimes, as with startups, it's very important to ship fast. So you want to make sure that you don't spend 1 year creating your course. Because by the time that you finish your course, as you said, Florian, maybe the library will be deprecated or something, or maybe somebody else will take the lead and just publish a course before you and just steal that kind of glamour that you're looking for, that kind of fame that you're looking for. So don't be perfectionist. I was spending 2-3 hours per video, per 10 minutes video to edit them. I found out really quickly that that was not productive. It was taking too much time. And as you start creating content and courses, something that I learned the hard way is that you should understand, and I think that, Florian, you agree with me here, not all reviews will be positive. So not all the reviews that you're expecting for your product, your course, your blog, whatever, will be positive. So you need to expect to have some bad reviews. It's impossible for you to please everyone. What's important at the end of the day is that the ratio of good and positive reviews outbalances the one that you have in terms of bad reviews. And you need to accept this idea really quickly as you publish your product, because if you try to, if you see like a bad review, right, somebody complaining about your course, and you instantly feel down about it and just discouraged, and you have this kind of idea that I don't want to do this anymore because people are not enjoying my content, I'm clearly bad at it, right? So if you go with this kind of approach, you'll only hurt yourself. Why? Because there are certain people that will never enjoy what you do. And there are certain people that won't enjoy anything. And I've had a student at some point enrolling on my Jetpack Compose course that gave me 1-star review and said that he wanted to learn Room and architecture patterns and clean architecture. And you need to understand that there are people like that expect something from something that it shouldn't be, right? So you need to get accustomed to that idea. And finally, something really important that you should know as you start gaining some revenue, some income, is that a course or a blog post, maybe a blog post, it's more like that, but a course will not be a passive income as everyone expects it to be. It's clearly not like that. I've had a certain lecture on my course about Coil, where you load images from the internet. And because Coil has changed their API 4 or 5 or 6 times, I had to update that lecture every time. And you have to also update the affected lectures, right? Because you can't only update one that contains it. So I had to go through a lot of trouble updating APIs. Also, as Compose was going from alpha to beta and to the release version 1.0.0, I also had to update API. So it's a continuous effort of you trying to update the course. to keep it up to date, and to also answer students' questions on the QA section, on the messages, answering reviews, trying to understand why people give you bad reviews. So it's a lot of time that you have to invest. It's not like you publish the course and then you receive money and that's it. Don't imagine it to be like that, because it doesn't. It's not like that.
Okay, so we had a lot of points here. Let me just quickly summarize this because I made a lot of notes. So when people consider creating Udemy courses or just content in general, because you don't have to create paid content right away, the first and most important thing is that they have to just start, right? Excuses, everyone comes up with excuses. Not having time is usually, when you say you don't have time for this and that, then you usually mean it's not a priority for you. We usually have time for other stuff, unless we are a guy like Elon Musk or someone who has like 5 companies at the same time. There is time somewhere in the day. You might have to stop doing some other time-wasting activities, but there usually is time, so this is not an excuse. Then you said something interesting, which also when I asked people on YouTube what questions they have for you, someone mentioned the same thing you just mentioned, that they have self-doubt about creating content because they think, what qualifies me to talk about a topic? And you mentioned this, that you don't have to be an expert to teach something because you actually learn best by teaching something. And my approach to this is, I don't know if you noticed, but I started making YouTube tutorials very early after I started learning to code, like 3 months after I started learning to code. So I was a complete noob when I started. My approach with this always was, just be honest about it. If you are honest about what you know, then you don't have anything to lose. It's just important that you don't try to trick someone, that you don't try to look like an expert that you are not. But if you're honest and say, okay, this is what I know, this is what I studied, and this is what I'm comfortable with explaining to someone else, then you can make content about this. Now, if someone is a complete beginner and doesn't have the real world experience, then he probably should not create paid content right away if he can't provide the quality. If you can't provide the quality because you don't have the experience yet, then start with free stuff. Start creating your audience on YouTube or Twitter or somewhere else where you can give programming tips. So this is one way to get around this feeling of not being good enough yet. Start by making free content and be honest about what you know. So this is also not an excuse that's valid. Equipment, the next thing, I hear that so often. This is the worst excuse, that I don't have the equipment. I don't understand this at all. Because when I decided to create YouTube tutorials, I started on the same day when I had this idea of creating YouTube content. I didn't want to wait a single day to start this. So for me, there was I don't have to buy the equipment. What I did was I bought like a 20 or 30 bucks microphone on Amazon. And there are actually a good microphones for that price. Now, the microphone I have now costed like 200 euros, but there are actually cheap microphones that have a good enough quality to get started. So this is also a garbage excuse. You can use your smartphone as your webcam. This is what we are both doing right now to record this. We use the Droidcam app to record this. Droidcam app, $5 or something for the premium version. So everyone can afford this. Yeah, cheap mics, and there is free open source software like OBS, for example. You can use OBS to record your screen, and this one is free. There's another one that's called, HitFilm is actually just for editing, I think. But with OBS, you can record your screen, right? So OBS definitely works.
Yeah.
So you don't need a lot of money to get started. Get a cheap mic, and worst case, you could even use your phone's mic to get started. Although audio is somewhat important for the quality, because having bad audio is really annoying for the viewer, but it shouldn't be an excuse to not get started. Then you mentioned that you have to be able to grind. This is, in my opinion, the hardest part, because when you start something, there's always this phase in the beginning where you're really motivated, intrinsically motivated, it's new for you, but earlier or later there will be a dip in motivation. Yeah, this is where many people stop. Many people start a YouTube channel and then they blast out content in the beginning, but then they realize that it's not growing that fast and then they stop. This is a pattern that that you can see really often. There is not really a trick for this or a secret sauce. You just have to find a way to stay consistent. Maybe by structuring your day. Maybe by using something like the Pomodoro technique, if this works for you. Just try out different techniques. What works really well for me is just having a daily schedule where I say exactly, okay, at this time, I have to sit down and do this task. And this works for me. But people have to find out what works for them. Also, a good approach that works for many people is to just set a small amount of time that you have to work on something each day. You can do longer than that if you want, but set a small goal. Say, for example, okay, every day after work for 30 minutes, I work on a course. I work on continuing this course. And you can actually get a lot done quickly if you just work for 30 minutes on it every day. Try something like that. You just have to see what works for you. Then you mentioned that you have to evaluate the idea and the topic you want to make a course about to make sure that you don't release something that no one actually wants to see. And this is also what an audience is useful for. So I never had this problem because I built my YouTube channel first and people already told me what they want to see. So this is another reason why I think it makes sense to start with free content first, because then you build an audience. An audience is not only useful for marketing, but they will also tell you what they want to see. And then you exactly know what you want to make, what you should make content about. For me, the problem is actually finding the motivation to create courses about these topics that people want to see. At the moment, I'm struggling with this a bit because I have been doing this for so long, and after a while, it's just the motivation just wears out. But I exactly know what I should make courses about. If money was my main priority right now, then I would know exactly what people want to see from me. So this is what an audience is useful for. The difficult part is actually to stay consistent, as I already said. This is the only real difficult part in my example.
Yeah.
And practical examples. Yeah, this is something I mentioned before. People learn best by actually building stuff. And if you create a course, then it makes sense to have at least a part in it that takes the theory and actually applies it to a real project. This is a better way to learn, in my opinion, than just reading. Reading is way too passive. You can read for hours on end and not remember a single thing later because this is just not how you learn programming. So this goes already into the details on what exactly to put into a course. But yeah, this is important. Let me just one more second. Yeah, I made one more note, but actually don't remember what this was supposed to mean. Okay. Yeah, I know what I mean. You also mentioned that there are courses that cover too much stuff at once, and I have the same opinion. I watched a few of these courses where people try to explain huge topics and architecture and testing at the same time, and I was never a fan of this because they don't explain anything of this in detail. In my opinion, I've never seen a big course that covers a huge variety of topics that actually covers the single specific pieces of it in enough detail that you actually understand it. It's often just a lot of copy pasting. Okay, copy this huge class and then copy paste this and then just do what I did because this is how you're supposed to do it. There are some people who make courses like this, and I'm not a fan of this myself. I like to have more focused courses. Now, they shouldn't be too focused. You should probably not make a course on how to create a notification on Android. This is maybe a bit too small. That's good for a YouTube tutorial, but for a paid course, this is probably too small. But I'm not a fan of these courses that are like, here we learn clean architecture and testing and UI and Jetpack Compose and everything at the same time, because I've never seen a single course like this that was actually good. But maybe if people know good courses like this, then they can tell me in the comments below. And the last point, perfectionism, which was a problem for me. Yeah, perfectionism and just in general, it's so easy to put too much focus and too much time and effort into stuff that doesn't actually matter, especially when it comes to editing videos. And this is what was happening to me. There was a point when I made YouTube videos, when I would need like 2 weeks to create a single 10-minute tutorial because I put too much effort into it, way the wrong places. This is something that can easily happen, and I just had to fix this. On purpose. So I really had to pay attention where I put my time, and I really had to say to myself, "No, this is enough. You don't have to put any more effort into this. You don't have to make this sound perfect. You don't have to make this cut or this animation perfect. Go ahead, keep it as it is, and just finish this project faster." This is also something that's really important, but this also comes down to practice. And there's no point in overthinking this. People just have to start and then see how it goes and then see what works for them. But yeah, I think this was a lot of really good points. Did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, the last 2 points. So just for our audience to have a quick recap, just remember that not all reviews are going to be positive. So whatever you're going to do, you're not going to be perfect. You're not going to be a 5-star course. That's impossible. It's impossible to please everyone, and you shouldn't try to do that. It's important what the majority says. And finally, whatever you do, don't try to think of it like a passive income. So don't try to think of your course or blog something that you do right now. You invest some time right now, and then you can just completely forget about it. It's not like that, at least not in tech. Maybe in some other areas it could be, but in programming, that's really usually not the case.